Christianity's arrival in Africa is a deeply layered and multifaceted history, stretching across centuries and shaped by the interaction between indigenous African traditions, political forces, and external religious movements. The story of Christianity in Africa begins in the early centuries after the birth of Christ, but its full reach expanded significantly during the colonial era. From its early foothold in northern Africa, Christianity spread to the entire continent, transforming and blending with local cultures, ideologies, and practices. In the first few centuries of the Christian era, northern Africa became one of the earliest cradles of Christianity outside of the Middle East. By the 1st century AD, Alexandria in Egypt emerged as a major center of Christian thought and scholarship. Egypt, then part of the Roman Empire, was highly influential in the early development of Christian theology. The city of Alexandria was home to one of the most important Christian schools, where scholars like Clement of Alexandria and Origen taught. They helped shape early Christian thought and debate, laying the theological foundation for much of the Christian doctrine that followed. The ancient Egyptian Christian community became known as the Coptic Church, which today remains one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. The rise of the Coptic Church in Egypt is intricately tied to the spread of Christianity across North Africa. As Christianity expanded westward along the Mediterranean coast, it reached present-day Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. Carthage, in what is now Tunisia, became another major center of Christian scholarship. Figures such as Tertullian and Saint Cyprian rose to prominence in Carthage, contributing to the intellectual growth of the early Christian church. North African Christians were known for their strong sense of identity and fierce resistance to heretical teachings. This period saw the emergence of influential theological works that would echo across Christian history, and North Africa's early Christian communities were critical in shaping global Christianity. However, Christianity in North Africa faced a number of challenges. The region's status as part of the Roman Empire meant that Christians experienced cycles of persecution, particularly during the 3rd and early 4th centuries under Roman emperors who viewed Christianity as a threat to imperial unity. Despite these challenges, North African Christians remained resilient, and their theological contributions endured. The eventual legalization of Christianity by Emperor Constantine in the early 4th century provided a reprieve for these communities, allowing them to flourish once more. The spread of Christianity to other parts of Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, is tied to a much later period of history. While Christianity had established roots in northern Africa, the Sahara Desert acted as a natural barrier that limited the religion's expansion southward in the early centuries. It was not until the establishment of European colonial empires in the late 15th century that Christianity began to make serious inroads into sub-Saharan Africa. European missionary efforts, led primarily by Portuguese, Spanish, French, and later British and German missionaries, brought Christianity to regions in West, Central, East, and Southern Africa. The arrival of Christianity through European colonization is a contentious and complex chapter in African history. For many African communities, the arrival of European missionaries coincided with the beginning of the Atlantic slave trade, colonial conquest, and exploitation. Christianity was often promoted as part of a civilizing mission in which European powers sought to convert Africans to European cultural, religious, and moral systems. In many cases, this conversion process was intertwined with the suppression of indigenous African religions and cultures, leading to a form of spiritual colonization. European missionaries arrived in Africa with various approaches and degrees of influence. Catholic and Protestant missions were among the most prominent, with each denomination aiming to expand its own interpretation of Christianity across the continent. The Portuguese were among the earliest to spread Catholicism, particularly in areas such as Angola, Mozambique, and the Congo Basin. Catholic missionaries often accompanied colonial administrators, creating a close relationship between the spread of Christianity and European political control. The Jesuits, Franciscans, and other Catholic missionary orders played a significant role in converting African elites and establishing a Christian presence in these regions. In contrast, Protestant missionary efforts gained momentum later, particularly during the 19th century. British and German missionaries, motivated by the abolitionist movements in their home countries, sought to convert Africans in regions like modern-day Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa. Protestant missionaries placed a strong emphasis on education, literacy, and the translation of the Bible into African languages. This strategy had a profound impact on African societies, as it opened up new opportunities for African converts to participate in a global Christian community. For instance, in West Africa, Protestant missionary efforts contributed to the rise of Christian communities such as the Yoruba and Igbo in Nigeria. Christianity's expansion into sub-Saharan Africa also intersected with African agency. Africans were not merely passive recipients of European religious influence. Many African converts played active roles in shaping the future of Christianity on the continent. African evangelists, teachers, and leaders emerged as significant figures in the Christian mission, adapting Christian teachings to local cultures and practices. This process of adaptation and indigenization gave rise to a variety of African-initiated churches and movements. For instance, in South Africa, the African independent churches, such as the Zion Christian Church, blended Christian beliefs with indigenous African spirituality. These movements grew rapidly and demonstrated the flexibility of Christianity to merge with African cultural and spiritual traditions. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is another example of Christianity's deep African roots and resilience in the face of external pressures. Christianity was introduced to Ethiopia in the 4th century through the efforts of Frumentius, a Christian missionary who later became the first bishop of the Ethiopian Church. This church became one of the earliest state churches in the world and remains one of the oldest Christian denominations in existence. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintained a distinct identity, separate from both Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, for centuries. It became a symbol of African Christian heritage and independence, particularly during periods of external invasion and colonization. The resilience of Christianity in Africa during periods of foreign domination is seen in other regions as well. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, as European colonial powers expanded their control over the continent, Christianity faced the challenge of being viewed as a tool of European imperialism. Many African nationalists criticized the close relationship between European colonialism and Christian missions. However, Christianity also provided a platform for African resistance to colonial rule. African Christian leaders and movements became important voices in the struggle for independence, advocating for social justice, education, and equality. By the mid-20th century, Christianity had become a major force in African life. The end of European colonial rule and the rise of independent African nations brought new opportunities and challenges for African Christian communities. The post-colonial era saw the growth of Pentecostal and charismatic movements, which appealed to many Africans with their emphasis on personal spiritual experience, healing, and prosperity. Today, Christianity continues to evolve and adapt in Africa, with vibrant and diverse expressions across the continent. Christianity's journey to Africa is a complex narrative marked by early theological developments in North Africa, centuries of missionary activity, the interplay between European colonialism and African agency, and the ongoing transformation of the faith by African believers. Its arrival was not merely the result of outside forces, but also a testament to the dynamic interplay between external influences and internal adaptation, which continues to shape Africa's religious landscape today.